Greetings, thanks so much for watching. My name is Alex. You are watching the Alexander the Great YouTube channel, where we discuss my favourite bands of all time. Today we're going to be talking about potentially my favourite metal band that there is, which is Dream Theater, a progressive metal band from the United States. Dream Theater have been going up since the 1980s. They've got a new album this year. They've got an extremely solid discography to talk about today. So it's going to be a real fun time. So strap yourselves in, grab a drink, and we'll get started. Before I do get started, of course, if you're brand new, please consider subscribing to the channel if you do enjoy this content. Please make sure to like the video if you enjoy, and then finally, make sure to leave your comments in the comment sections below. But yeah, without further ado, let's just get right down to it. So we've got all the albums. We've also got the Change of Seasons EP, which sometimes isn't included in these lists. That's going to be an interesting one to talk about too. So to start us off with, we've got the 1989 LP, their very first album, which is When Dream and Day Unite. I think a lot of people would probably put this around the C category, and so I think the consensus is really that they didn't exactly hit the ground running. They weren't really coming out swinging for quite a few reasons. So number one, to start us off, the production quality isn't brilliant with this one, obviously. I feel that they could have done a little bit better in that category. That's just one thing, just one problem. The other problem, for me, I don't think the songs are quite up to par quite yet. Some of the songs are pretty good, actually. Afterlife is really good. Fortune in Lies is pretty good. Yahtzee Jams are kind of a classic song as well that they sometimes roll out with. A Matter of Time's good. The other songs, I'm going to really struggle to think about which ones are on the album. Light the Fuse and Runaway, or whatever that one's called. There's a few early songs on the album that aren't great, and some towards the end as well aren't brilliant. I do think, for better or worse, it's sort of a proto-Dream Theater, this one. It's sort of, they're really leaning into their stylistic influences. Rush, definitely a bit of Rush. So really, they hadn't really formed the Dream Theater sound quite yet. They were really just kind of covering their influences a little bit too hard, I think. So I think a C is probably well deserved. It could be a little bit worse. Some people would say it's maybe in the D category. But for the sake of a few songs that are actually really good, Afterlife especially, I'd at the very least give it a C. You could definitely do a lot worse than When Dream and Day Unite. For a first effort, not too bad. Coming in at number 2, 1992's Images and Words. I think a lot of people probably see me on this one. I think this is an easy S tier, without a shadow of a doubt. Every single song on this album, start to finish, is a progressive metal classic, in my eyes. Anyway, Pull Me Under, greatest hit, of course. Another Day, it's a ballad. It's a solid ballad for this. I mean, it's not my favourite, but it's a good song. Take the Time is one of my favourite songs that they've ever done. Surrounded is decent. It's not the best song that they've ever written, but it goes so well with the atmosphere of this album. Metropolis Part 1, The Miracle and the Sleeper, is, I would say, the anthem that showcases Dream Theater. Under a Glass Moon, another absolutely stunning song, just like Take the Time. One of my favourites. I'm going to say this quite a lot in this album, because this album is just filled with so many brilliant songs. Wait for Sleep is a good interlude up to ultimately the last and probably my favourite song on the album, which is Learning to Live. Definitely, I think it's the longest song on the album, but it's not just it's nothing to do with the length really. It's the fact that that song encapsulates and closes off this album so brilliantly. Again, the thing about Images and Words isn't just that every single song is magnificent and majestic, if you will. It's the fact that they all just flow so brilliantly, and the atmosphere is just so enveloping. Like, the album cover sets you up with what to sort of imagine, I suppose, when you're thinking about the songs. It's just so royal, so regal. It's not too heavy. It's not too melodic. It's just everything that it needs to be. I would consider this their magnum opus. If there was just one album that I would say is perfect and flawless, it's that one. Well deserving of an S tier, their masterpiece. Coming in number 3, we've got 1994's Awake. This is maybe a little bit more controversial, so some people would rate this one relatively high, somewhere in the A or B tier. For me, tentatively, I will also give this one an S tier, and for good reason, I should hope. So although I would say Images and Words is a more solid album because every song is brilliant and there's no misses, I do think while there are a few misses peppered within Awake, the best songs on Awake, I think, maybe better than Images and Words. I mean, while Images and Words has a more regal atmosphere that I mentioned before, I think Awake has a bit more of a dark, brooding atmosphere, a bit more mystic, I guess. And again, I'm taking my cues from the album covers, because while one is I suppose, more royal. The other one's a bit more mysterious. The atmospheres that these two capture from their songs is just brilliant. I'll talk about the songs a little bit too. 6 o'clock. Of course, it's not a masterpiece, but it's a brilliant song, and it's a nice, jumpy, energetic song to start with. Caught in a Web, I hate to talk like a broken record here, but another one of my favourite songs. The keyboard, the atmosphere from the keyboard alone is just glorious. There are so many songs on both Images and Words and Awake from Kevin Moore's keyboards that just ooze atmosphere. Next song, Innocence Faded. Innocence Faded was the first Dream Theater song that I ever heard. And for that reason, it's probably still my favourite song. You can have a Dream Theater song like this, a bit more of a simplistic Dream Theater song, and you can feel as though, you don't have to commit so much time to it. Whereas with other songs, they really do lean into, how they're taking their time to build up some sort of tension and so on. So really, for a shorter song, Innocence Faded, as well as Caught in a Web, are just spectacular. Erotomania, one of the first songs I remember learning on guitar, actually. As an instrumental song, it's vibrant, it's not boring, it's entertaining, it's classic. Voices, not quite as interesting as the songs that have come before, but it's still pretty good quality. The Silent Man, as an acoustic song, it's fairly good. I can't really knock The Silent Man so much. I think for a band as talented as Dream Theater, I think obviously they could have maybe done something a little bit more showy, I suppose. But I suppose that doesn't really assist the music itself. It doesn't have to be full tilt every time they're making a song, so I can't really knock that one. The Mirror. I think The Mirror is a decent song, a good, heavy, groovy song, but I don't think it's their best. Still good. I think it's better than Lie. I think Lie's it's a bit on the plain side to me, but I'm being quite harsh. I'm trying to find fault where maybe you couldn't really find it otherwise. I think Lifting Shadows Off a Dream is the next song. That one is probably the only song on the album that I would genuinely skip. Scarred, I hate to say it, one of my favourite songs I've ever written. So, yeah, just the song length as well on Scarred really helps it. Innocence Faded or Caught in a Web, they don't need to be that long to be as good as they are, whereas with Scarred really does build up to something bigger. And finally, you've got Space Dive Vest, the album closer. If you know the meaning of the song, it does gel a lot more emotionally with you. And I really do enjoy the fact that it's returning to some of the motifs from The Mirror, returns to one of the melodies. I love it when bands like Dream Theater do that in their songs. So, Space Dive Vest is an emotional, heart-wrenching song. And I think that it really does strengthen the album for it. So, returning to the comparison between it and Images and Words, I do think on a technical level, Images and Words is stronger, but I do enjoy some of the songs on Awake just that little bit more on the whole. There's just so much jubilant, epic, triumphant atmosphere in both these albums, and I think that Images and Words does a little bit better in that category. It has a bit more of a flow, whereas with Awake, I just think it's got a consistent atmosphere. The vibe that you're getting in Awake is pretty ever-present, but at the same time, I think it does have a little bit of a shakiness towards maybe the second half. So I'll leave it at that. Awake is still an S. It's a flawed S. Brilliant album. Next we've got Change of Seasons, the EP Change of Seasons from 1995. So the song itself, A Change of Seasons, the 24-minute epic, I would give an S. But in terms of the EP with all those live songs, I think really, if we're going to be honest with ourselves, while the song scores higher, the EP scores lower. And we're talking about the EP here. If they had just released the single, or they did something a little bit different, they didn't have the covers and the live songs, it would score higher. Technically, I would say, objectively, Change of Seasons is their best song. Even though it's 24 minutes, the best thing about a good, long Dream Theater song is that it just flies by. And what I appreciate with A Change of Seasons, compared to something like Octavarium, which we'll discuss later, it has so many interesting parts. It's not just one or several sections, let's say. It's so many different pieces that really stack neatly together to form a really solid song. I love how it starts, I love how it ends, and it's got so much in between that ultimately just stop it from being boring, because again, with a 24-minute song, it's quite a challenge to make it interesting and justified for that length of time. Without really talking about it at length, I'm just going to say that A Change of Seasons, while potentially being their best song as one song, I do think that the package it comes in does ultimately let it down. I hope that's not too disagreeable. Honestly, I think that's probably the most sensible thing I can say about it. So it definitely gets an A, but sadly I can't really get any higher than that. What is it, number 5? Falling into Infinity in 1997. I think this is a better album, at least, than When Dream and Day Unite, but it's definitely a peg below everything that I've just mentioned. So I'm going to start it off in B. So let's talk about it. So, off the top of my head, there's some really good songs in Falling into Infinity. It's really such a shame because a lot of people, a lot of Dream Theater fans, don't really tend to give it the credit that it deserves. And they'll say that ultimately because it's such I think, a clear step below Awake in Images and Words, a lot of people tend to think of the album only in that context. I'm going to talk about as many songs that I can really think of just to at least give colour to this ranking that I'm giving. New Millennium it's not a masterpiece, but it's a good song. You Not Me, just as good a song, I think. Peruvian Skies is really, really good. A really interesting song. It brings a completely different kind of texture than the other songs so far. Hollow Years, some people may call this a bit more of a radio song, but I really do appreciate the progressions. If the song just went on in the way that it started, then I'd say it's quite a boring, quite a weak song. But the way in which it sort of develops with a bit of time, it does ultimately leave it in a better place. So, a bit of an average song, either way, but it's an enjoyable song that I wouldn't skip. I'm going to get this wrong potentially. I think Hell's Kitchen is next. A lot of fans do enjoy Hell's Kitchen. I think it's one of the weaker songs on the album, but the next song that it's flowing right into, Lines in the Sand, I definitely think is the best song on this album. It's one of the best songs of their whole career, Lines in the Sand. Especially after the build-up from Hell's Kitchen. It just has such a tension and release. I just think it's a really well-written song. What can I say? What's next? Anna Lee. I'll talk about a few of these songs. I think I've missed one. Burning My Soul. Anna Lee. Just Let Me Breathe. And then finally, Trial of Tears. I'll talk about these. So, Burning My Soul, bit of a weaker song in context of this whole album. Anna Lee, I'd probably say the same. Just Take Away My Pain. Take Away My Pain is one of the best songs on the album. It's a bit stronger than the first two especially. I would even say Just Let Me Breathe is their second best song on this album. And finally, Trial of Tears, I think has a really good keyboard solo. I don't think it's justifying the, I think it's about 13 or so minutes long song length. I think that in terms of the other songs they've written so far that are going around that sort of length of time, like Scarred or Learning to Live, I think they're way better. I'm just comparing them to some gems of their back catalogue, so it's easy to knock it down a peg with that being said, but yeah, in sum, I think that Falling into Infinity isn't such a bad album that a lot of people would say it is, but do I think it's an S or an A? No, I think a B is pretty fair. I think some people would say that this album is sort of their mid-90s, their grunge, their alternative flavoured album, and I see that, but I don't think it hurts it that much. I think really I'm only going to be talking about the objective quality in the songs, so I don't really care what stylistic flavour that they're giving it, whether it's 90s flavoured or not. If it's good, it's good. If it's average, it's average. I think this is pretty much bang on average in terms of everything they've done. So yeah, Falling into Infinity, it's a good album, but I think somewhere in the middle is where it will ultimately go in the tiers. And next we've got, what is it, number 6? We've got Metropolis Part 2, Scenes from a Memory in 1999. A lot of people consider this their masterwork. It's a concept album. I don't think it's a double album. No, it's just a single album. It's a decent single album, of course. Whether I put it in S or A, I'm always sort of changing my mind on this because on the one hand, I think in terms of the songs, I would maybe consider in some this album to be an A tier. Good A tier. The thing about a concept album is it's quite a hard challenge for a band to get just right because they have to really play everything up to the bigger picture and the concept. And sometimes that means they can't really go off in other directions so much because it still has to play into the wider puzzle, so to speak. So with that being said, it's an interesting concept album. I don't care that much for the story, but I at least appreciate what it's trying to do and what it's going for. I think if the album was just a little bit shorter, and they neatly packaged it with that shorter length and they sort of threaded all the songs together a little bit more neatly, I would still give it a high S. But in terms of the quality of the songs, I think the first half is pretty damn solid. I think it's, scoring pretty high. But towards the end, with songs like Finally Free or The Spirit Carries On, it's sort of losing me slightly. And I don't want to say that, because I would say as a concept album, this is a really, really good album. But the songs themselves, Overture 1928 is damn good. I love how it goes into Strange Deja Vu. I want to say Strange Deja Vu is actually one of my favourite songs. It's one of the first songs I heard. I remember downloading that one from LimeWire. Then what have we got next? Through My Eyes, I think. And then Fatal Tragedy, and then Beyond This Life. Those songs with Dance Fraternity and Home would be an S, but then it's just personal preference, I think. I just don't enjoy the next songs after Home. I think my problem as a fan is, while I do like those songs, and I think that if we're talking about the concept album, if it was just as good in execution as those songs, and it had been tied together just a little bit better, I hate to say that, but if they'd done something like this, like I'm trying to describe, I would give it an S. What am I going to give it really, though? It's either a really high A, or it's a really low S. So I might generalize it just as a low S. I'll have to talk about what comes next, really, to give it more context. But really, Metropolis Part 2, Scenes from Memory, I really appreciate what they've done. And honestly, even the sort of Metropolis Part 1 to then Metropolis Part 2, I appreciate. I mean, there's not really much meaning in that Part 1 and Part 2. I don't think Metropolis Part 1 is really a concept song. The album, Metropolis Part 2, although it's, I suppose you could say, a bit contrived, because Part 1 didn't really mean anything. It was just sort of I think they kind of made it as a bit of a progressive affectation, what they thought they maybe should have done as a progressive band. But Part 2, a lot of really good songs. I don't think it's scoring as high as an S in terms of the songs, but in the execution and most of the songs, I think I'll be as charitable as I possibly can, and I will give it an S. If I change my mind, I change my mind. Really, I just think, as a Dream Theater fan, I don't think it's Dream Theater playing to their absolute strengths like Awake or Images and Words. So yeah, I'll be as fair as I possibly can. So it's as low as an S that I can give it. If you care about the concept album, it's definitely an S. But if you're only looking at these songs in isolation, a la carte, track by track, I would probably say A is a bit more fair. But we have to score these on albums rather than songs. So as an album, I'll give it an S. Coming in at number... I keep forgetting. Coming in at number 7 is 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence in 2002. This is another one that a lot of Dream Theater fans do score rather high and sing the praises for to high heaven. And I think it's one of the most interesting albums that they've released. But in terms of the songs... I keep going back to this, but in terms of the songs, separated and set apart from the wider concept... Because 6 Degrees, it's the 6th album, and 6 problems or syndrome, whatever you want to call the things like alcoholism or schizophrenia and so on. I'm going to rate, and then I'm going to talk about my rating. So I'll probably give it a B, a little bit higher than Falling Into Infinity, which I do enjoy. The reason for why I give 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence a B, rather than something higher like some would, is because while Disc 1 is actually really good, I really enjoy most of Disc 1, which is just single songs. Disc 2, especially because it's the second part of the album, feels quite bumpy, quite disjointed. It doesn't really flow very well from Disc 1 to Disc 2. It feels a bit tacked on, which is strange, because the album is 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence. The song is one part, but they've got a lot more going on than just that, so it feels a little bit less cohesive. So I think because Dream Theater were actually thinking about putting Metropolis Part 2, or the as much of a song as it was in 1997, on the end of Falling Into Infinity, which is really interesting. I think obviously it would have worked a lot better as an album, but I think really this is how 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence feels. It's a bunch of songs like Disc 1, and then an awkward partner in Disc 2. The songs in Disc 2... I should probably talk about Disc 1 first. Let's talk about Disc 1. So, Disc 1, some absolutely great versatile songs. So you've got the metallic masterpiece in The Glass Prison. It's got to be what a lot of people probably say is one of the best songs. One of the most metallic songs, I'll give it. Maybe in the top 10 for me. And then you've got Blind Faith, which I love how it feels like a Falling into Infinity song. I personally really like that vibe. So one of my favourite songs from the album, Blind Faith. And then Misunderstood is a really good song as well. By song 3, it's flowing pretty decently. I think the 4th song is The Great Debate. And I think that's another really strong song as well. I don't think there's any problem with the flow here so far from song 4. Song 5, which I think is Disappear, while it fits into the concept of 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence, because it's dealing with death and so on, I don't love that song. I would say that's probably a skip song for me, which is not great for Dream Theater. But yeah, it is what it is. I just don't love how it ends. I just don't love Disappear so much. However, then you've got disc 2 of 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence, which I should say just now, it's kind of meant to be one single song, but on the album it is separated into the parts. I think there's about 6 or so parts of 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence. I could be wrong, but there's about 6 parts. Starts with an overture, which I don't really appreciate and enjoy so much, but whatever, it's an overture. And then you've got About to Crash. About to Crash is just fine. It's not smashing. It's not coming out of the gates in a grand kind of way that it could have done after the overture. Maybe in a way that Metropolis Part 2 kind of did with Strange Deja Vu. What's next? War Inside My Head is a good, more aggressive track, which brings a bit more texture to this album. Because I think, as 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence goes, I think it's an album that's balancing the metallic and non-metallic rather decently. So yeah, War Inside My Head is a little bit more aggressive. And then you've got The Test That Stumped Them All. Again, this song, it kind of reminds me of The Great Debate. It's got that same sort of energy, same sort of pacing and tempo. For me, it's just an average song, really. It's not really wowing me so much. What's next? And then you've got 2 more songs which are a little bit more mellow. Once again, balancing metallic and non-metallic. This is where it sort of disjoints fully for me, because I think it's sort of losing the flow and the cohesion. Goodnight Kiss, Solitary Shell, which are the next 2 songs, are good, quite somber songs. I don't care enough to listen to them, and normally I'm skipping them, which is a bit of a shame. Again, this is all just my preference. I mean, I do enjoy the album, but yeah, the worst songs, some of the worst songs I think are those 2. For what they're doing, for the style, it's not bad. It's just I don't care for what they're doing, really, so I'm not really appreciating it. That's maybe my fault. Then you've got About to Crash, Reprise, which is it's good. I appreciate, again, when it comes to concept albums, I love a good motif. I love a good suite. I love how they're returning to certain things. Kind of just like how Metropolis Part 2 does this. I really enjoy how 6 Degrees does this. But then you've got the grand finale, which ultimately I don't love, really, which is a shame. So yeah, coming off the heels of that sort of assessment of Disc 2, 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence is quite a flawed concept album, well, compared to Metropolis Part 2. Where I rank it, I think, is pretty fair, because it's a lot more burdened by the concept that it's trying to play to compared to Metropolis Part 2, at least how it feels. In terms of how it pulls it off, I think that Disc 2 from Disc 1 is not a great flow, really. If they had maybe packaged it a bit neater, I keep on going back to this idea of cohesion, but if they'd have packaged the album a bit more, if they'd have packaged the album a bit better than this, it would score a bit higher, because there are some decent tracks, and I like the concept. It's just I think really they go a bit too experimental in some parts, so instead of a blessing, I think it's a little bit of a burden for its flow. So while it's a decent, interesting, relatively strong album, It's better than Falling into Infinity. I think there's just some things that let it down, and it's not scoring an A for that reason. If it was just a bit stronger, if it was packaged a bit better, maybe it would get an A. Never get an S, unfortunately. I don't think it's ever going to get that much, but yeah, that's just my problem with 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence. Some songs I'm not a fan of at all, and I think the Disc 1 to Disc 2 flow is just not very good. So yeah, I will leave it in B. Let that sell. That might change a little bit because there's a few other albums in B that I'll be putting. I'll have to place them somewhere that will make sense. So 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence, not bad, but not spectacular. Coming in next, 2003 with their 7th album, which is Train of Thought. So I feel like I should probably talk about where I'd rate it and then rate it, but what I'm going to do is place it and then talk about it, because I don't think this is going to come out so much from left field, because a lot of people really do enjoy this one. Some people don't love it, but I don't think anyone really hates it. I think some people don't love the style that they're going for, which is a bit more nu metal flavoured, and some people think they did brilliantly with what they were going for in this one. I fall into the latter camp. I definitely think this is a fantastic album, one of their best for sure, and I'll say why. So I think it's a perfect-ish album in the sense that for the style that they were going for, I don't think they could have really done better. Talking about the songs, As I Am is decent. It's a quite safe Dream Theater song. It's not that progressive, really. I mean, it gets a little bit proggy here and there, but as an album opener, I don't fault it too much, because I think just to start off and just to open up the album, they could do a lot worse. This Dying Soul, I should say, continues where the Glass Prison started. So what the Glass Prison technically started off, I should have said this before, is what's called the 12-step suite, which is, I believe it's, how many songs? I think 6 songs. I might be totally off, but it's a few songs of that sort of length that talk about Mike Portnoy's struggle with alcoholism, which is kind of another concept in and of itself, really, another concept. So it's another concept, so to speak. It's not an album, it's just a series of songs from quite a few albums between 2002 and I think 2009, which talk about that. It's interesting. So it's a continuing motif that comes back for quite a few albums, which I really, really like. It's really proggy. Does it necessarily help this album? No, but it helps them as a band. It helps their back catalogue. As a song itself, it's a pretty strong song. Once again, it's a fairly heavy song too, but not in the sense that it hurts its progginess. It really fits into the wider atmosphere that this album's playing to, which is a bit more of a darker, a bit more harsher, metallic atmosphere. Next, we've got Endless Sacrifice. Endless Sacrifice is rather flawed, unfortunately, in a quite tragic way, because the first part is pretty damn dull, pretty boring, even the chorus. But when you get to part 2, it gets a lot more dynamic, a lot more vibrant. Next, you've got Honor Thy Father. It really does lean into the metal side of things, with an exceptionally good drum intro. One of the most metallic things that Dream Theater has done, that particular drum fill. As for what I think about that song, you get an amazing start, and I don't think it brews brilliantly. I don't think it builds up particularly brilliantly. I mean, it does build, but maybe not in such a way that Endless Sacrifice did. Not exploring so much depth, maybe, that it could have done. Vacant is the next song, which feels a bit more like an interlude, and maybe you could say that it is, really, in the sense that its next song following, Stream of Consciousness, is where it flows to directly. It's basically just the Waiting for Sleep into Learning to Live. This is sort of this album's version of that. So Stream of Consciousness is potentially the best song on the album. It's extremely strong. It's got a good balance of heavy and proggy, and it's quite a somber, sincere song as well. It's a very emotionally deep song in terms of how it's building up. And then finally, you've got In the Name of God. This is maybe one of the problems with this album's style. It's metallic, but with this style of metal, it's not that rich. It's not that deep. It's quite simplistic, unfortunately. So one half of this song is metallic, not necessarily to its huge detriment, but it is simplistic nonetheless. And then by the second half of the song, it really does build up brilliantly, and it's building up well. So it feels like there was some purpose to that first section, just like Endless Sacrifice. So ultimately, I would say, in terms of how these songs all play off of themselves with the same sort of brood and the same sort of dark energy, I think it's deserving an S tier, but I will say it's a low S tier in the sense that the textures and the atmosphere could have been a bit more varied. The musical style as well could have been a bit more diverse, you could say, but I think for this kind of projection and the fact that they only wrote this in about a month, as they say, I think this is a really solid Dream Theater album. So if you're going for something a bit more on the metallic side, maybe even in the more new metal, more alt metal flavoring, I think this does deserve an S. As for whether it's as strong of an S tier album as Metropolis Part 2 or any of the other ones from the early 90s, I wouldn't say so, unfortunately. I think that as good a songs as you've got in this LP, I just think that it's not as varied as it should be. It's not as proggy, maybe. For what it really does well with metal, it does suffer slightly in the proggy department, which is sad. But what it does well with the metallic energy, I think it does better than it did it in any other Dream Theater album. So, well-deserved S, but it's a low S here. It's better than the lower albums down here. Decent, solid, consistent album. But I think that every other album in the S tier, there's normally a lot better songs, really. There's a few decent tracks. I think Stream of Consciousness and Parts 2 of Endless Sacrifice and In the Name of God are really good, but it's just the other tracks potentially let it down just a little bit. But I don't want to talk down this album too much. It is an S tier. It's one of Dream Theater's best albums, but yeah, I will just give it that qualification. If you enjoy the proggier Dream Theater, this might need to be maybe an A or even a B, depending upon your taste. So let's just move on. Let's keep on going. Next, we've got the 8th album, 2005's Octavarium. Just like 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence and Metropolis Part 2, this is yet another concept album. So the concept of Octavarium plays on the idea of the musical octave, the series of 8 notes, 8 natural notes. It's playing into the other concept, not just of that, but 8 songs, and you've got one long song, which is 24 minutes, or 3 times 8, all playing to this idea of repetition, loops, either going from the first note in the octave all the way back to the first note again. They're playing on a lot of concepts of feeling trapped or stagnancy or coming full circle. As another concept album, and especially with the final 24 minutes song, there's some things that I love about Octavarium, and there's just other things that I think are just okay. So I'm going to talk about the strong things first. So Octavarium, the track at the very end, the 24-minute closer, is either their best or it's joint best with A Change of Seasons. Different from A Change of Seasons, it doesn't necessarily have so many different sections and parts, but I think that as a song, it's a much more easy listen. It doesn't lurch from pillar to post. So depending upon my mood, I would maybe say this one's a better song, but objectively I might suggest that Change of Seasons is a more interesting track because of how varied it is. But yeah, to sing the praises of Octavarium, I think the Octavarium track is S tier Dream Theater. But the other part of the album, the non-epic, just the songs, the other 7 songs, I don't think they're anywhere near as strong, unfortunately. I think they're just okay. Kind of feels like 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence. It's like you've got this long song at the end, but it's sort of, you're given a bit of a starter course of a la carte single tracks. The other thing as well, I think, with the idea of, this Octavarium concept is I feel that it's a little bit meaningless in a way, a bit of a gimmick. I don't want to say that it's a bad concept because it's interesting. It does give a bit of meaning to a lot of these songs. It threads them together a bit more than otherwise, because if you've got the first song starting in F and then the next in G and the next in A and so on, that's interesting enough. It makes you think, okay, that's a bit more intentionality than they would have done otherwise. So I appreciate how interesting that is, but As for whether it's an interesting concept to the extent of Metropolis Part 2, ultimately, no, it's not, I would say. In terms of the songs before the finale, like I say, they're just average, really. They've got a bit of a consistent quality line, which is kind of middle of the road. Root of All Evil is another entry into the 12-step suite, but the song itself, I just think it's not bad. It's average. It's not bad. It's doing okay. The next song, I believe the answer lies within, it's fine. It's a decent length for what it's doing, but in terms of everything else on this album, there's a lot better that it's doing later down the line. So next you've got These Walls. Again, I hate to repeat myself. It's just decent. It's not strong. It's not really giving you shock and awe like a lot of those songs that I've talked up before are doing. Do I think it's bad? No, I don't think it's bad, but it's a bit disappointing because you've got such a good song at the end of the album. You've got a few songs just like this one, which are entertaining enough. They're very Dream Theater-y. With a concept album, it's very difficult to execute it brilliantly because you have to make sure that everything's meshing and everything's flowing and everything's integrated. And I think with this song, I think they ultimately thought we're going to have to write a song in the key of A, and here we are. They've had to sort of box themselves in that way, and this is ultimately the problem that every song, maybe apart from the final song, every song has. It's trying to serve a greater purpose than itself. That is the sad situation. So for what it's doing, it's not doing badly, it's just doing okay. Next we've got I Walk Beside You, which a lot of people compare to a bit of a U2 sort of flavour. This is a fairly good song. I mean, I enjoy this one a bit more than the other few I've just listed. I think this is maybe a part of the concept that they're exploring. This idea of cyclicality. They're cycling into a lot of their influences, potentially, like U2. So once again, it's playing to the concept pretty well, but in terms of the song itself, it's more or less just another average song. Next, there is the very Muse-flavoured Never Enough. Potentially my least favourite song on the album. I do think it's still trapped in its box. Really, it has to think of how it's serving the concept of the concept album. It's just a little bit too musy, unfortunately. I think they could have toned that down just a tad, but oh well. And next, what we've got Panic Attack. Panic Attack is a bit of a fan favourite. Either Rock Band or Rock Band 2 really popularised it. Panic Attack is a decent song. Again, it's not scoring that high. Really, it's not that explorative. It's a bit monotone. It doesn't feel that deep, unfortunately. It's just a good song, really. It's a bit more metallic, just like Root of All Evil. But yeah, I think once again, it's scoring pretty damn average for a Dream Theater effort. I've just realised now that I've ordered these tracks a bit wrong because Never Enough is D and Panic Attack is C. So I've got that one wrong, but oh well. But yeah, the last song that I'll talk about is going to be Endless Sacrifice. Endless Sacrifice is potentially the best song, apart from Octavarium itself. It's a bit more vibrant, a bit more varied, and I do enjoy it. Just like a lot of songs from Train of Thought, it does take a while to build and brew with the tension and release, because after about part 2, it does get a lot more dynamic, and it's got a bit more of a satisfying range that a lot of these songs on Octavarium do not have, really. So, one of the best songs from the album. It's a good song. It's a very decent song, actually. It's one of the clear standouts. But as far as the quality compared to other songs from other albums, it's once again just average. It's strong. It leans strong to high, but overall, it's not masterpiece sort of work compared to things in Awake or Images and Words. And I think that the final song and the concept that song really leans back into is a huge reason for why I think this album generally is as good as it is. And I haven't really rated it yet, so what I'm going to do is place it about here. But I will say, just like 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence, it's not a very balanced album, unfortunately. I think that's pretty plain to see because it's got one 24-minute song at the end. I mean, that's not objectively a bad thing. They could have balanced it pretty well. It could have been a bit more consistent. But I think in terms of the company that 24-minute song keeps, despite the technically consistent concept that's throughout the whole album, I just think ultimately it's not a very balanced feeling album. That final song really does somewhat eclipse the wider album. So if we're going to score it in the context of an album, like I say, average songs, not bad. There's only, I think, maybe one really skippable song for me, which is Never Enough, towards the end. But otherwise, fairly good songs. It's just Octavarium, it's really just a long song with an album attached, rather than an album with a long song attached. That's how I feel. Let's just keep on going. Let's jump on to what we got next. We have got Systematic Chaos in, I think, 2007. I think I'll talk a little bit about my feelings on this album before I actually rate it. So Systematic Chaos, it's another quite interesting album because it's got quite a lot of stylistic versatility in it. It's not just one thing, which you could kind of suggest is a bit more how Train of Thought comes across. This has metal, it has proggy, has soft, it has quite a lot of stuff. But the problem is, I don't think the songs are that good. I think even the strongest songs on the album aren't, again, they're not smashers. And I said this sort of for a lot of the Octavarium songs, but I think if we're going to be truthful, it's a fairly consistent feeling album, but it doesn't score a very average mark, if that makes any sense. Talking about the songs, In the Presence of Enemies Part 1, I really like. I think that's one of the strongest parts of the album. I think Forsaken is next. I don't think Forsaken is a particularly great song. It's just pretty simplistic. It's very made for radio in how it comes across. Constant Motion is a good Metallica flavoured song. I think it's kind of sticking out like a sore thumb. It's very on the nose. It's very, very clearly thrash flavoured. I don't think Dream Theater play into that very well, unfortunately. Same can be said for Dark Eternal Night. I appreciate what they're doing for Dark Eternal Night. I just don't think that for Dream Theater it's a particularly vibrant song. The lyrics do come across as a bit immature, a bit childish as well. It seems like it was written by maybe a 13 Slipknot fan. That's how I sort of interpret it. But is it a bad song? No, it's not a bad song. It's not too bad. I think next is Ministry of Lost Souls. A lot of people swear by this song. Dylan from Become the Night, I remember him saying that this is one of his favourites. I just don't see anything in this song, personally. I've listened to it countless times. I don't really consider it a very interesting Dream Theater song. Is it a bad song? I would maybe say this is a boring song, really, for Dream Theater, so I would give it that discredit, unfortunately. Same can be said about Prophets of War. For Dream Theater, it's just quite a weak song, at the end of the day. Repentance is another part of the 12-step suite. I think this is definitely the worst aspect, the worst chapter of 12-step suite. Again, you could say that it's a decent concept continued, but in terms of what it's doing for this album, or what it's doing in the song, I think it just completely falls flat. Like if you've got however long, you've got about 7 minutes or so to burn, and you want to listen to the cameos and so on. I think a lot of famous rock stars are the voices you hear in the song. I just don't care enough about that, personally. So this is one of the weaker Dream Theater songs in my eyes. So that's not a good thing. And finally, we've got Presence of Enemies Part 2, which is the continuation of Part 1, which is about 10 minutes. So ultimately, this is sort of in context, a 24 minute song, kind of just like Change of Seasons or Octavarium. However, even if you gave it that grace and you said that, okay, let's consider it sort of a long song rather than two shorters, if we were to give it a bit more credit and maybe just to think of it as just one long song and not two sections, kind of like, you know, Pink Floyd's Shine On You Crazy Diamond Part 1 and 2, I still wouldn't really consider it that brilliant. Part 1 is pretty good, but I'm just not really very excited for Part 2. And I think that the sort of chants from Mike Portnoy deeper in that song in Part 2, I find it quite tacky, really. I don't think it's very Dream Theater. It's not, once again, I'm going to say this a lot for a few songs, but it's not leaning into Dream Theater's strengths. It's less progressive. It's trying this tact of going in a more metal direction, a bit more dark sort of atmosphere, which is fine, but it doesn't always work, sadly. I think sometimes it just comes across as a bit boring and a bit too simplistic. So as for where I'm going to place the album after saying all this, I think the low B or even high C is ultimately where I'd have to place it. Oh, this is difficult. This is probably the most difficult thing to rate so far. Because there's some good things about this album. I think it flows fairly okay. But the songs themselves really lets the album down either way. Okay, I think I will put it here because it does kind of feel like the quality of When Dream and Day Unite. You've got some really good songs and you've got some weaker songs. This kind of has that same sort of energy to it. It's got some decent songs. It's got the part 1 of Presence of Enemies. Constant Motion is okay, so I'll say that's a good song. Same thing exactly with The Dark Eternal Light, as cheesy as it might come across in places. I don't want to naysay so much with Forsaken. Forsaken is, while I skip it most of the time, it's listenable. It's not an offensive, it's not a very un-Dream Theater song. It's just a bit radio, that's all. The other songs are where the album does get let down. Prophets of War, Ministry of Lost Souls, I don't see anything in, personally. This is all personal preference. Some people will absolutely love those songs, but I think this is the separation between B and C for me. If it didn't have these banes, these thorns in its side, I'd be much more happy to give it a B. But as it sits, with that being said, once again, just to be very clear, C isn't a bad thing. It's just worse, much worse than these other albums that I've talked highly of before. C is average. It's not bad. I think D is where you'd really start to say that it's bad. So it's far better than other albums that I'll be talking about next. In terms of the best songs on Falling Into Infinity, they are scoring way higher as well compared to Systematic Chaos. And the worst songs on Falling Into Infinity are way better as well than Systematic Chaos. I'll leave it at that. I think that hopefully says enough about my feelings on this one. Next, we've got 2009's Black Clouds and Silver Linings. I remember this album being the first new Dream Theater album that I was exposed to. And 2009 was the year I actually saw them live twice. Once was in the UK, and then I went to the United States. I had no idea they were playing in the United States when we were in Florida. I remember seeing it advertised somewhere, and then we got tickets to see the show where they played the entire new album in full, which, depending on how you see the album, is either amazing or not so amazing. So yeah, I do look back on Black Clouds and Silver Linings with a bit of fondness, because it does remind me of that sort of new energy that I felt from Dream Theater. So it was a special time, it was a special feeling that I was given from this new album. As for where I'd place this album, I'd probably place it on balance, probably about here. And the reason for that is the bookend songs are by far the best thing about the album. A Nightmare to Remember, and especially Count of Tuscany, are magnificent Dream Theater songs. Even though they're playing into a bit more of a darker atmosphere, just like they did with other albums, while you've got some really good opening and closing songs, I just think that everything in between, everything awkwardly sandwiched in the middle of the album, I just think is really quite subpar for Dream Theater in a similar sort of way as Systematic Chaos. You've got Rite of Passage, which feels very like Forsaken in a way. It's a very safe, although very radio Dream Theater song, a bit dumbed down on balance. But again, it's not a terrible song. What I think is far worse is the next songs. I think Wither. So Wither is more of an acoustic ballady sort of song. In that context, it's not maybe the worst. It's pretty boring as far as Dream Theater is concerned. So I think it does hurt the album, sadly. Next you got The Shattered Prison, which is the final part of the 12-step suite. I preferred this versus Repentance, but everything in the 12-step suite otherwise I feel is far stronger, sadly. I just feel like it's sort of it's closing the 12-step suite for its own sake. It's not really a song. It doesn't really feel like a song in its own right, unfortunately. I feel like it's just the full stop on the 12-step suite. And then finally, or kind of finally, you've got The Best of Times. The Best of Times is a fairly vibrant song. I just think the lyrics sort of hold it back slightly. The lyrics are a bit cheesy. unfortunately. I shouldn't be saying that because it's about the death of Mike Portnoy's father, but I feel like, again, as a Dream Theater song, I don't think this is a brilliant track, unfortunately. Just like all these other ones sandwiched in between the bookend songs. The Count of Tuscany, I just think it's not because it's a long song, and I don't want to say that the bookend songs are helped so much by their length. I just feel they lean into that length. I think they do a lot with what they're given with those lengths. And Count of Tuscany is no exception. I feel like the atmosphere that's created, built up and released throughout the song is just something special. They do something different in the Count of Tuscany that I don't really think they pulled off ever before, even with things like Octavarium, even with Change of Seasons, and especially compared to In the Presence of Enemies. The sort of narratives I feel that are present both within the Count of Tuscany and especially with A Nightmare to Remember. Even if we're just going to represent the album mostly by those two bookend songs, I think you can say enough good only about those two songs that it will get the album a lot better than otherwise. Because if we weren't talking about the bookend songs, this album is going to be D or even E rated for me. I've already said, I think at least it feels like it. The album is pretty short. It feels like one of the shorter Dream Theater albums. And the sort of weight, the colossal weight that's present within the two songs at the start and at the finish, it completely eclipses and overshadows everything else, really. Just like I put Octavarium in B, I would put Black Clouds and Silver Linings in C. Pretty much for the same reason. You've got some huge strengths, but very imbalanced. So you've got a little bit more balance with this one, but the quality just isn't quite so good. The average songs in Octavarium helped it, whereas with the songs wedged in between the bookend songs in Black Clouds and Silver Linings really pulls this album straight down. So with the upthrust of the bookend songs, I think giving it a C is very fair. Thank God it's got those two songs, because those two songs are some of their best. Everything else is just pretty damn terrible. Next, what have we got? We've got A Dramatic Turn of Events, 2011, I think. This was quite an interesting album because when Mike Portnoy left after Black Clouds and Silver Linings, I was ultimately under the impression that Dream Theater would never be the same again. And I thought that they would pretty much be maybe a bit more disappointing. And I didn't want to have that disappointment come through. I didn't want to listen and find out that these albums were potentially even a bit of a letdown for me, because Dream Theater were a really special band for me in so many ways, and I didn't want to have that weighing on my conscience. So this was where I jumped off the Dream Theater wagon. After Mike Portnoy left, I just assumed that they would never be quite as good. But how wrong I was, my word, because A Dramatic Turn of Events is actually, objectively, so to speak, one of their most technically good albums that they've ever made. It doesn't have an underlying concept like Metropolis Part 2, and maybe it doesn't quite have the sheer epicality of Images and Words, if that's even a real word. I think it does do really well in the difficult timing that it was written within. I think the best things about this album are, number one, every song is just great, really well written, really good progressive metal. And number two, this is maybe a strength or weakness, whatever you want to call it, but it feels very much like a return to Images and Words. So in a sense, a return to form. Dream Theater have had a lot of stylistic iterations throughout their years, so there's never necessarily a pure Dream Theater style, but I think Images and Words is a really decent way to represent the band, because it's them at their best. It's when they made their masterpiece in my eyes, so them returning to a sort of Images and Words-ish sound, I appreciate. It's not just that they're returning to Images and Words as well. They are giving it a bit more of a metallic edge. They are sort of rounding it off with that sort of metallic sort of energy that came a bit later. So it's stylistically absolutely magnificent. There's a couple, I would just say, if I'm going to be very honest, there's one or two songs that aren't great. I think the second song, Build Me Up, Break Me Down, does really let this flow down. But maybe other than that one song, it's as strong an album as it could ever possibly be, in my opinion. I was really left quite surprised when I came back to Dream Theater about 5 or so years ago to understand that, wow, this album I completely overlooked. And it's just such a tragedy. One of the best album. The thing is, it's a collection of songs without really something to prejudice you. It's not a concept album. It's not a themed album. It's just a bunch of Dream Theater songs, really well-written Dream Theater songs, in an album, just like Images and Words. And it's not playing up to some sort of new quirk, new style, new affectation. It's just Dream Theater doing the Dream Theater thing, doing the progressive metal thing, in a way that I can barely fault. It's just one bad song, and it's not even that bad. So whereabouts do I place it? It's easily at least in A. I think I've kind of talked and described a little bit of its content to render it un-S-like, because Build Me Up, Break Me Down is definitely not very S. But every other song, effectively every other song, is very, very good. Maybe as high scored as Change of Seasons. It's pretty similar to the other albums in S tier, like Train of Thought and Metropolis Part 2. I just don't think maybe the highs are as high. I don't think the consistency is as strong, potentially, but it's damn close. It could just be the lack of nostalgia. If I had a little bit more nostalgia for this one, it might actually go up into the S tier, but oh well. Although some people would say that, you know, the return to the Images and Words vibe, I mean, honestly, there are some songs that feel like mirrors to Images and Words at points. I love Images and Words, personally, so that is a huge pull factor for me. If you're not the sort of person that loves Images and Words, which I cannot understand why you wouldn't be, maybe it wouldn't be quite so high. So once again, I'm really tempted to put it in S, but just because of my own emotions and my own lack of nostalgia. Do you know what I'll do? I'll be fair. I'll put it at the top of A tier, because if we're talking about A Change of Seasons as an EP with all those other songs tacked on at the end, that is a bit of a flaw. And if we're talking about the albums or the EPs, whatever you want to call them, the overall collections of the songs, we can definitely say that A Dramatic Turn of Events is a bit more of a pure and strong, consistent Dream Theater effort. I'm going to put that in top A. I think that fits it quite nicely, I think. So the top of A is quite a high rating, if I should say so myself. Let's keep on going, let's keep on moving, let's rock and roll. So 2013, we've got the self-titled Dream Theater album, also a song called DT12, because it's the 12th album. Some people think this is one of their worst albums, and I see why someone might call it a weaker Dream Theater album. I, though, cannot say that it's a weak album when Black Clouds and Silver Lining is a comparison to draw. So where do I put it? I would either put Dream Theater 12 either at the low point of B or at the very height of C. And the reason for why I would say that, let's just put it there for a moment. The reason for why I'd say that is because while I'm not wowed by all of the songs, there's not one song that I could call special in my eyes, not even the last song, the long song. There aren't really any songs that I feel really drag the album quality down, really. I just think that the through line throughout the whole album isn't that low. I think it's pretty medium, far higher potentially than what you're getting with Black Clouds or Systematic Chaos. I think maybe the weakest thing, funnily enough, bizarrely enough, is Illumination Theory, the 20 or so minute song at the very end. Some people really do praise that one as one of their best songs. I just think that it's not really a very strong Dream Theater long song, unfortunately. I think a lot of people are sort of easily misled by the fact that it's long, so it must be good. I don't really see that length in this context as anything more than a bit of a gimmick, a proggy gimmick, unfortunately, because there are some long songs of Dream Theaters that are very good and are served by the song length. I just don't really see anything particularly helping Illumination Theory by it being quite as long as that. I've listened to it quite a number of times to make that judgment quite comfortably, and I wish I did enjoy it, but for me, I just can't bring myself to consider it that good, really. I think it's quite a boring song. The other songs on the album, I'm going to struggle to remember them. The first overture, the False Awakening Suite, I think you call it, is a pretty good way of opening the album. Really trying to remember these ones. I'm going to find this quite hard. The Looking Glass, Behind the Veil. Ah, this is sad. I've actually had to get the Dream Theater lyrics out to see which songs I'm going to forget. Oh, The Enemy Inside is actually really good. Really good in context for the album. I think it's probably one of the better songs from the album, but not fantastic in its own right. Enigma Machine, I think that's an instrumental. I take or leave that one. Sometimes I skip, sometimes I don't. Bigger Picture, I think that's more of a softer song, isn't it? I remember it being okay. Behind the Veil is good. Surrender to Reason, I can't even remember. I think that's a bit more of a... I think that's the song that they were kind of said to have kind of emulated Rush with. I may be remembering it wrong. Along for the Ride. No, maybe it's that one. Well, the thing is, if I'm not remembering the songs particularly well, that kind of tells you everything you need to know about this one. So, but either way, I mean, I will just be honest. I don't think most of the songs are bad. I just think that they're not scoring as high as things like Dramatic Turn of Events or Images and Words, obviously. I don't consider the album a spectacular failure like a lot of people portray it to be. Really, do I say this is anything more than just an average Dream Theater album? No, not really. I think it's average but comfortable. I don't think it's bad. I think it's quite an uninventive, unimaginative Dream Theater album. But I would prefer that they play it safe and go with something like that, with that being the blueprint, rather than going off in some random way that they don't play well with. I think that's probably a good segue into this next album. So let's talk next about The Astonishing from 2016. So while I said that Dream Theater self-titled was playing it very safe in both good and bad ways, gave it a bit of consistency but not a huge flare in the quality department, I think, as a lot of people do, that The Astonishing is a really poor album, and I'll say why. So it's a really long album to start off with, and like I say, I'm not the sort of person that considers length to be a barometer of quality in any context. I think it really has to be justifying the length, or else it's ultimately to its discredit. Dream Theater, this is another concept album. The story of the album is a bit Disney-fied in a sort of futuristic dystopia, and it tries to tell the story in 2 discs. And the problem with that is, number one, songs are just not that great. Number 2, I don't care about the story very much. It's just not a very vibrant story. Even compared to Metropolis Part 2, which I ultimately didn't love, but I still enjoyed somewhat. Finally, number 3, the length of the album as the vehicle for the story is so damn unfortunate, because the songs aren't very good, and it's way too bloated to the extent that the story is not conveyed effectively whatsoever. So I think I've sort of summarized the problems with The Astonishing pretty well here. There's not a whole lot more I care to add. I just think that for everything that it was trying to do, I mean, it was an interesting concept that they wanted to try, especially after sort of the flavorlessness of their self-titled before it. I just think it was a failed experiment. I think a lot of people would agree. Some people would give it the grace to say that maybe there's a few odd tracks that are pretty decent. I just don't care enough to even say that much. The wider picture of the Astonishing album is so unfortunate that it sort of negatively colours the songs within it, which is sad. But it's how I feel. It's how a lot of people feel that, The Astonishing is a pretty disastrous Dream Theater album. To give it its dues, I mean, it tried something different, but I just think it was a flop and a failed experiment. So it gets an easy bottom of the barrel rating there in E. Do I think it's bad? I think it's, in context for Dream Theater, pretty damn bad, to be very clear. But yeah, let's totally move on. Let's completely move past it now. So what we got next? We got 2019 with Distance Over Time. While of course I wouldn't say this one is as bad as The Astonishing, I do not think this is a particularly great Dream Theater album. While some tracks here and there are fairly good, I really enjoy Barstool Warrior, and I really do appreciate Untethered Angel. Every other song lacks a consistency, it lacks a depth of feeling. It just feels very Dream Theater by the numbers. It just feels like Dream Theater throwing a load of proverbial S at the wall, hoping stuff would stick. And I don't think ultimately a lot does. I feel that a lot of these songs just feel very cobbled together. Very, very minimalistic efforts. Do I think that it's maybe as bad as When Dream and Day Unite? I would probably say it's just slightly weaker overall. It's got a very good production. I mean, I think a lot of these albums, other than Dream and Day Unite, have really, really good audio engineering. When Dream and Day Unite is let down by its poor recording quality and mixing and engineering and so on. While that is present in Distance Over Time, I just think the one thing it's lacking is decent songs. It's got quite a few good songs, like I've said. Like, I'll always listen to Barstool Warrior. I think that's 100% the highlight of this album. I just think that the rest of the album, more or less, is just weak Dream Theater music. I think this is everything that a lot of people portray Dream Theater self-titled as. Some people think that just because it's maybe an improvement from The Astonishing, that must make it a good album. You know, if you're going to look at it from those sort of rose-tinted glasses, then you can think that, but I just think that objectively, compared to everything else, most of everything else that they've done, it doesn't score that well, really. I hate to say it. So I'm going to put it at the lower end of C tier, and I'm not really doubting that. I'm not really in two minds about that. I think, really, in my eyes, it is definitely one of the weaker albums that they've put out, which is sad, but hey, there we go. I won't really blabber on so much. I'll just leave it in C and move on to the next album. Next album being 2021's A View from the Top of the World. Funnily enough, after quite a few bad albums here that I've talked about, I consider this a lot closer in quality to A Dramatic Turn of Events than I do The Astonishing. I mean, that's not saying much, but what I mean by that is where I would place this is maybe somewhere like there. So A View from the Top of the World is a really well-written album. So many really decent songs. The Alien is such a great Dream Theater anthem, so to speak. It showcases Dream Theater and opens the album brilliantly, first of all. Answering the Call is a pretty decent song. Again, not the most varied song, but definitely a strong song. Have as number 2. Awaken the Master, Invisible Monster, and Transcending Time are some of the next songs, which I, once again, remember being pretty good songs. Pretty good progressive metal songs. I don't think they feel contrived at all. I feel they're natural Dream Theater songs. They don't have some sort of quirk or some sort of deliberate bend to them. I just think they are just very similarly to A Dramatic Turn of Events, just a bunch of Dream Theater songs written really, really well with love, not having to deal with some sort of concept underpinning every single song, and not having to flavour everything awkwardly. So yeah, as for where I put it, it's not quite as good as A Dramatic Turn of Events. It's a very similar album to Octavarium, maybe, just like the self-titled Dream Theater album as well, in that it's got one long song at the very end. I would actually say that this is sort of a opposition. I would even say this is sort of a reversal of how Octavarium feels. While Octavarium by far has its strength in its long song at the very end. On the other hand, with A View from the Top of the World, I don't think that the long song at the end is bad. I don't think it's as weak as Illumination Theory. I would still say it's probably the weakest song from the album, but that's only just to say that the songs on this album are doing really, really well. It's pretty damn good, pretty well written. So I'm not going to necessarily say that this means that the final long song is a bad song. It's just overshadowed by a decent album. So once again, it just feels like an inversion of Octavarium. As for where this places, for me, the album in a ranking, I think that somewhere close to Octavarium is pretty fair. I think it's a more consistent album. It feels less disjointed than Octavarium. I just think that Octavarium as one single song does so much for the Octavarium album and gives it more meaning, of course, that it does leave A View from the Top of the World feeling a little bit less deep, a bit more shallow by comparison. But again, I'm really comparing a good album with just maybe a slightly better album. It's not to say that Octavarium's that much better. I just think that these two albums, while being very good, do have to be placed somewhere in a spectrum. So yeah, I would put View from the Top of the World in B, It's still better than 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence, which some people would consider one of their strongest albums. So I'm giving A View from the Top of the World a lot of praise with this rating, ultimately. While both these albums are good, I just think that where I sit with those three, it's something like this. I think this falls sort of somewhere between the middle. I think all of these are good, but I just think that as an album, as how everything flows, I consider it just a little bit better than 6 Degrees. One of the best things I can say about A View from the Top of the World, just like Dramatic Turn of Events, just like Images and Words, if I just want to sit down and listen to a bunch of really well-written Dream Theater songs, I can't really go too wrong with A View from the Top of the World. Like if I want to listen to something that's free from the contrivances of the concept or the stylistic niche, if I want to just listen to Dream Theater sounding very Dream Theater-y, then this is one of those really good showcases to just spin, zone out to, and enjoy. So gets a good grade, gets a good B, gets a high B, I suppose. As for whether you'd consider it better than 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence, that's completely up to you. I would definitely rather, on balance, let's say back to front, listen to A View rather than 6 Degrees. I think there's maybe some better songs in 6 Degrees. The first 3 songs on disc 1 are probably edging out at the musical average from A View from the Top of the World. I would still consider View from the Top of the World as far less disjointed, far less muddled feeling. Let's leave it there. Let's just leave it at that. And finally, we've got this year's new release of Parasomnia. This one I haven't really had much time with, as nobody really has yet. My overall impression isn't brilliant, unfortunately. I don't think the fact that Mike Portnoy has returned means that this must therefore be a really good Dream Theater album. Despite his return, I consider it a rather somewhat disappointing Dream Theater album overall. I think that Night Terror is a pretty decent metallic flavoured Dream Theater song. I think that pretty much everything other than the Shadow Man incident and maybe Dead Asleep are pretty much either average or sub-average. Some people really enjoy Bend the Clock, I can't remember. Some people really like that one. I don't really care for that one. The second single, A Broken Man, I think it's called, I didn't really enjoy that one so much when I first heard it. Midnight Messiah kind of has that problem with As I Am. It's just a very stylistically quite unsophisticated Dream Theater track. It doesn't really feel very proggy. It seems like dark and metallic, but not with that sort of Dream Theater quality to it. So kind of like how I've talked up A View from the Top of the World and Dramatic Turn of Events, this album had the problem of having to be in a certain conceptual box. They had to keep on bringing it back to the concept of night terrors, nightmares, and so on, parasomnia. And there are some things within that concept they explore that are pretty cool. Like, I think Shadow Man Instant is a pretty decent song. And Dead Asleep is a fairly decent song. And In the Arms of Morpheus, the album opener, I love how The Arms of Morpheus and Shadow Man Instant come back together in a horseshoe at the very end. But I just think that the concept of Parasomnia isn't really that interesting. I think that it's Dream Theater doing something similar to Black Clouds and Silver Linings at the end of the day. They're trying to go dark, and I just don't think they do very well in that sort of stylistic box. So, interesting album, interesting concept album, you could call it. But as for where I'd place it, I would feel probably most justified placing it either there or before Systematic Chaos. I think with Systematic Chaos, it still feels nostalgic for me. This was the earliest new album. I don't remember this being a new album, actually. I remember it being the most recent, yet existent album. As for the feelings that I'm feeling right now about the album, it's not that great, unfortunately. I just think that everything else that Mike Portnoy was involved in, on average, was just better than this. I think it's better and more interesting than Distance Over Time. I think, however, it's pretty similar in terms of what I get from it as an album of theirs to When Dream and Day Unite. There's some things that I really enjoy about When Dream and Day Unite, and there are things that obviously let it down. And that's the same sort of thing I feel about Parasomnia. There's some things that I find interesting, but I do think that there's a lot of negatives that do overshadow the good qualities as well. So for the moment, it's going to be at the middle of C. In some ways that I can talk a little bit higher about Parasomnia versus Systematic Chaos. It's probably nostalgia, but on balance, I think that I would probably prefer to listen to Systematic Chaos. That's just me. But there we are. There we have it. There's my ranking of Dream Theater. I've tried very hard to be delicate and surgical with my ratings and to really give description and context when needed, but this is where I would place them. Some of these are a little bit subjective, some of these I kind of mix around with here and there, like Metropolis Part 2. Sometimes I put that one in A, and sometimes I put Train of Thought also in A. Sometimes I put Dramatic Turn of Events in B as well. And everything else other than that is pretty consistent. Maybe there'll be a change in rank within the same tier, but never like a whole rank up or down with these other ones. But yeah, I suppose that is my rating, that is my ranking. So thank you so much for reaching to the end of this video. If you're brand new, once again, please do consider subscribing to the channel if you enjoyed. Please leave me a like if you liked this video. And of course, in the comment section below, do leave me your own rankings. I'd really appreciate that. I'm sure to read that as well. But yeah, that's it for today. That's me done. Peace. Signing off.
It's like one of my Japanese animes.
I think some people would say that this album is sort of their mid-90s, their grunge, their alternative flavoured album, and I see that.
Potatoes of energy, yeah. Look, boss, I went down the train.